Welcome to the still untitled Roro Live. Uh, I'm too lazy to make a video, whatever you want to call this. Uh, Today we're talking about Star Wars because I figure everyone could stand to not hear about other shit. So over the past few years, Star Wars has been on this rocky fucking ride of being bought by Disney. And they kept losing directors over and over and over again. And I was like, what the fuck is up with this? Well, why does this happen? And now, after looking at the whole thing from the back end, it really makes sense. What directors did Kathleen Kennedy not lose? Well, J.J. Abrams, he was in on it from the start, obviously, so he really doesn't count. Rian Johnson, and whoever directed Rogue One, I'm not sure about that one. But there was that anomaly in all of this, too. I think on Rogue One, pretty much Kathleen Kennedy had almost nothing to do with that because it was one of the ILM guys, like a guy who'd been with ILM since like the 90s or 80s, that came up with the idea for Rogue One, and it was his baby. And I bet she just kind of stayed out of that, and that's why it was good. But here's the thing. If the only director that Kathleen Kennedy could get along with was Rian Johnson, there's your issue. Rian Johnson, I feel, isn't really a Star Wars fan. He said as much in many interviews, and he wanted to take Star Wars and make it a new thing that he actually kind of liked or whatever, take it in a totally different direction and have all these new ideas. And that's somewhat admirable in that at least it's something new and different. However, when you do that to a thing like Star Wars, which is a classic myth or whatever, and you start plugging and playing with a bunch of shit, the formula starts not to work anymore, and you need to still at least work within the formula. I think Rian Johnson had this thought and this idea because he was being encouraged to do this by Kathleen Kennedy. And that's why Kathleen Kennedy kept losing so many directors, because they kept saying creative differences. What does creative differences mean? I think creative differences means that the people she was hiring were Star Wars fans, and that Star Wars fans knew that what she was wanting them to do was going to ruin Star Wars. They couldn't say anything about it because of NDAs and shit. But they're like, man, I'm not gonna fucking flush my career down the toilet ruining Star Wars. I think that's honestly why she was losing so many directors. So that means that really the death of Star Wars basically isn't Rian Johnson's fault so much. Rian Johnson is like a force of nature. He did what I would expect Rian Johnson to do, pretty much. He's an indie filmmaker, and if you hire him and tell him, man, I want something different, you can't hold him responsible for what you get. You know what I mean? The person responsible for Rian Johnson's failure is Kathleen Kennedy, because Kathleen Kennedy shouldn't have fucking hired Rian Johnson in the first place. This makes me really want to see Kevin Trevorrow's version of fucking Rise of Skywalker or whatever, because I think he basically quit over the direction they were taking the story, more than likely. Because if I had been Kevin Trevorrow, I probably would have quit over the direction they were taking the story. I left Last Jedi ready never to watch Star Wars again because of some of the choices made in that movie that I feel just ruined the entire story. And I knew what some of the choices for Rise of Skywalker would have to be, or at least the options for them. And none of those options presented a satisfactory ending to the story, which is why no one likes Rise of Skywalker. In fact, it's, I would say, the worst of the three by far. Like, Force Awakens has its issues. In fact, I would say Force Awakens is not great Star Wars, but it is decent. Like, it was somewhat competently made, and it was made by someone who loved Star Wars, and it was like a love letter to Star Wars. And that is better than, well, let's rape this bitch to death, which is kind of what I felt like the last two movies were. Uh, So, the other director that she managed to get along with was Ron Howard, who was brought in to save Solo. And that's yet another case of, I'm betting was it Phil and Lord or whoever it was that made 21 Jump Street and like the Lego movie and all that shit. She had hired them to do Solo. And I bet they were making a somewhat decent Han Solo movie until she stepped in. My bet is that Kevin Trevorrow would have made at least a somewhat decent conclusion to fucking Star Wars. Like, he's a capable fucking director. He's made good shit. Like, if you left him alone and he's a Star Wars fan, he would have done better than what he did under the direction of Kathleen Kennedy. And I guess that's kind of the point of this, is that she's really to blame for most of this, and that's why I'm fucking glad as shit that the mix-up or whatever in the structure of Disney is causing her to, lose some of her biggest fans and, get replaced eventually. Like, at the moment, she's still in charge, but she's not only in charge in name only. She's not allowed to do anything. She's not even allowed on the set of, like, The Mandalorian. Jon Favreau apparently threw her out. Something to the effect of, you don't know what Star Wars is, I believe was the issue, but, that's just rumor. And then there's all the social justice shit that she was throwing in on top of it. That's like, that's not even the real issue. That's a minor annoyance. Man, I don't want to get preached at about social justice in a Star Wars thing that's like a classic myth type of deal. Like, they don't fit. Okay, those classic hero journey myths are not the place for third wave feminism. They're not going to work there. It's sort of like you don't go and hold your fucking bar mitzvah at a fucking Nazi rally, right? You don't do that. Well, it's the same thing with this. You just don't do it. It does not make sense to. The hero's journey type stories are written by males for males, typically. People are like, why do only guys like Star Wars? Bam, 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 bam. We need more girls to like it. Let's try to add in some girly stuff. Let's try to add in, a bunch of female characters that make very little sense. And I'm not like against having female characters. I'm not even against having a female lead, as long as the thing we're preaching isn't, that. I don't know how exactly you would do a female lead and not, ruin the whole maleness of a fucking hero's journey. But I'm sure it could be done. Someone out there could have a fucking idea for it. It's obviously not me. But it's obviously not Kathleen Kennedy either, because she has no fucking clue what she's doing. And what's sad is that, like, Steven Spielberg said that Kathleen Kennedy is the best producer in the business. Well, maybe Kathleen Kennedy should go back to producing then, because she kind of sucks at being a fucking showrunner on a gigantic TV show made of movies, which is all Star Wars or Marvel are. Like, in a TV show, directors make the episodes, a showrunner directs the overall course of the show. And this is exactly what Kathleen Kennedy or Kevin Feige are doing in their respective roles at Star Wars or Marvel. They're, guiding the episodes, so to speak. They're directing the overall story. They're making creative choices that a director should not make, simply because they're only directing one piece of this very larger puzzle. They don't know how many other movies this person's going to have to be in or whatever. Like this is the shit that she should be doing. And picking directors who will help bring your vision to life is like half the job, probably. So when you really suck at picking directors, and or pick good directors and then go, okay, now I want you to kill this thing you love, okay? And they're like, what? And then suddenly you start losing them. That might be a sign. In my estimation, that's about what she asked them to do. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. So, who else likes Star Wars and is tired of hearing about other shit? Because I'm a little tired of hearing about a lot of this shit. I think I just need a break. I don't know. See you guys later.